This video is about the themes in chapter 2 of Mice and Men. In this chapter we get introduced to the life of a migrant worker on a ranch, and that's what we're going to talk about first, what it's like to be a migrant worker in 1930s Depression America. Then we're going to talk about hierarchy and marginalisation, and we're going to finish off by talking about the mounting tension. The first thing to say about the life of a migrant worker in the American Depression in the 1930s is that it's a very simple life. Remember, George and Lenny had all their possessions carried over their shoulders in a bindle bag. They don't have anything really. And when we get to the bunkhouse, which is the social place where all the migrant workers live, we see that it's a very simple building and the workers have very few possessions there. So the bunkhouse is a long rectangular building. Inside the walls were whitewashed and the floor unpainted. In 3 walls there were small square windows, and in the 4th a solid door with a wooden latch. Against the walls were 8 bunks, 5 of them made up with blankets and the other 3 showing their burlap ticking. So the whitewashed walls, the unpainted floor, this is incredibly simple. The small windows even make it feel slightly prison-like. The burlap ticking, it's not very comfortable sleeping material, is it? So it's a very basic life, almost like a prison. But each bunk has an apple box nailed over it, and in that apple box the migrant workers keep their treasured possessions. What have they got? Little articles, soap and talcum powder, razors, and those Western magazines ranchmen love to read and scoff at and secretly believe. And medicines on the shelves, and little vials, combs, and from nails on the box sides, a few neckties. The focus on cleanliness, the focus on self-care, and there's this desire to look good despite their strained circumstances. And then fascinatingly, there's these Western magazines ranchmen love to read and scoff at and secretly believe. Western magazines, of course, would have cowboys doing heroic things in them. And this is really what the migrant worker aspires to be. Some kind of masculine, powerful man who is able to perform amazing deeds as a cowboy. But there's something kind of beautiful about that life, I think, for the writer Steinbeck himself. About 10 o'clock in the morning, the sun threw a bright dust-laden bar through one of the side windows, and in and out of the beam flies shot like rushing stars. We've already talked in another video about the comparison between animals and humans. Here, you could see those flies as a symbol of the migrant workers, many of them no power, insect-like with their insignificance. But there's some kind of rare beauty to them. They shoot like rushing stars. There's some kind of cosmic significance to them. A transformation from flies to stars. Wonderful. So there's something that Steinbeck shows is admirable, beautiful, even spiritual about these migrant workers. Now, despite them all living together and sharing a bunkhouse, it's also very clear that the life of a migrant worker is actually quite a lonely one. And Steinbeck shows this not through the main characters, but through minor characters. He likes to do that. The bus driver in chapter 1 sort of symbolised the selfishness of Depression-era America. In chapter 2, we find out about the man whose bunk George is going to inherit, a man named Whitey. This man, why, he just quit, way a guy will, says it was the food, just wanted to move, didn't give no other reason but the food, just says give me my time one night the way any guy would. That's Candy talking about how this guy Whitey has left. There's this sense that these migrant workers don't really communicate with each other very much. They just stop for a while somewhere and then they move on and they don't really say why. So it's an incredibly lonely and incommunicative life. A few pages later, Candy, again seeming to represent the voice who understands the general behaviour of the migrant worker, says, "A guy on a ranch don't never listen, nor he don't ask no questions." "Damn right he don't," said George. So again, there's this kind of expectation of being shut up in yourself, not communicating with anyone. A really isolated and lonely life. And this is only furthered by the conversation that the boss has with George and Lenny when he's interviewing them. Isn't the boss sceptical about the reason why George and Lenny might be travelling together? He says, "I never seen one guy take so much trouble for another guy. I'd just like to know what your interest is." And again, he makes this general comment that migrant workers don't really take care of each other. So it's an individual, a lonely life. It's very symbolic that George starts to play solitaire when he sits down to play cards. That is a card game for one person, and we will see George playing solitaire a number of times through the novel. Remember, they're also near a place called Soledad, which is the Spanish word for loneliness. So this theme of loneliness is really strong, despite the communal setting. Slim, who is the wisest character of all and who we'll talk about in another video on the characters in chapter 2, comments that maybe everybody in the whole damn world is scared of each other. Great comment from Slim. That's really insightful. Fear seems to be ruling these men. And there's plenty of evidence for that in the lies that George tells to the boss, in the way they don't want to be kicked out, in the way Curly looks at Lenny. All of these things we'll explore in the video about the characters in chapter 2. There's a lot of fear in this place, and perhaps that's the reason for this kind of lonely and solitary life. Despite these difficult circumstances, this lonely and frankly quite miserable sounding life, there's a financial necessity for people to be migrant workers, to stay on these kind of ranches. And George expresses that very clearly when he says, "We got to keep it till we get a stake. We can't help it, Lenny. We'll get out just as soon as we can. I don't like it no better than you do." He went back to the table and set out a new solitaire hand. "No, I don't like it," he said. There you go. George points out the economic necessity of migrant workers finding work, travelling around and being somewhere, even if it's a difficult place, during the 1930s in the American Depression. On this ranch then, which represents in microcosm the life of a worker in the American Depression, we've got a very clear sense of hierarchy. Who's at the top of that hierarchy? The ones with the money. So we've got the boss and his son. And they both make it very clear that they are different from the other workers in the way they dress. When the boss comes in, we are told that on his head was a soiled brown Stetson hat and he wore high-heeled boots and spurs to prove he was not a labouring man. He's trying to look like a cowboy, isn't he? And these boots and spurs are clearly a status symbol for him. When his son Curly comes in a few pages later, we are also told, like the boss, he wore high-heeled boots. Again, some kind of attempt to distinguish himself from the other workers. So that's the top of the hierarchy. Who's next down? Well, it's the workers themselves, and specifically able-bodied white men. They're the ones out all day bucking barley. Their skills, their physical strength are what's really valued in this world. And how do we know that they're kind of next in the hierarchy? Because of the way they get to treat the ones that are not able-bodied white men. And that means the way they treat the black stable hand, the way they treat women, the way they treat people who are physically disabled. First of all, we meet Candy, who's a physically disabled character. He's been left back in the bunkhouse. He's carrying out domestic chores such as mopping, or as they call it, swamping out the bunkhouse. And he's missing one hand. It's one of the first things we find out about him. And there's something kind of decrepit about him. He's lame like his dog. And he's not really fulfilling his role in society there as a physically strong, active worker. Then we kind of shockingly find out that the Negro stable buck is someone who isn't normally allowed into the bunkhouse, but they let him in at Christmas, but they almost beat him to death when they let him into the bunkhouse, apart from which they refer to him with quite casually racist terms. They use the N-word a number of times to talk about him. Candy uses that word. George repeats the word after Candy and doesn't seem to mind using this word. So it's as if these racial slurs are really quite commonplace and show the low social status of black people in Depression-era America. And that shouldn't surprise anyone who's studied history and knows about the Jim Crow laws and the racial segregation that was taking place at the time across America. And then, of course, we have the woman, Curly's wife, the only woman in the novel. We'll talk about her in much more detail when we look at the characters in chapter 2. She's also marginalised. She has to stay at home. She's running around looking for her husband. And as the novel goes on, it becomes clearer and clearer that she has a minor role as well, a marginalised role. So there we go. We've got a strong sense of hierarchy with the boss and his son, the owners, the landowners at the top, the workers in the middle, and anybody who doesn't fit this white, male, able-bodied worker mould as a marginalised character, really at the bottom rung of society. So in this frankly quite miserable world that the migrant workers are living in, with this strong sense of hierarchy and where they have very few possessions, it's not surprising that there's a real sense of tension, the feeling that violence is bubbling away just below the surface perpetually. Pretty much as soon as George and Lenny come into the bunkhouse in chapter 2, George starts to get angry with the idea that there might be bugs in his bed. And we've seen these tendencies of George to burst out with explosions of anger, even in chapter 1, and it happens pretty much straight away in chapter 2. There he is, really willing to get furious about the situation he's in. Then a couple of pages later, Candy starts talking about the African-American character, and they say he's a very nice guy, but the story that Candy tells about him is that how he was let into the bunkhouse at Christmas and he was almost beaten to death. Jesus, we had fun. They let him come in that night. Little Skinner Smitty took after him. Done pretty good too. The guys wouldn't let him use his feet. If he could have used his feet, Smitty says he would have killed him. What? They like this African-American character, but they would have killed him. That's bizarre, isn't it? Again, this feeling of violence. And that violent tension is really only ratcheted up when Curly walks in. The first description we get of Curly makes him sound incredibly violent. In fact, the word pugnacious is used to describe him. At the moment he sees Lenny, it says he glanced coldly at George and then at Lenny, his arms gradually bent at the elbows and his hands closed into fists. He stiffened and went into a slight crouch. His glance was at once calculating and pugnacious. Then he squirmed under the look and shifted his feet nervously. There is a man looking for a fight. And fascinatingly, he doesn't even really seem to be in control of his body here. His arms gradually bent. There's no sense of Curly's agency about that. It's as if the arms were doing it themselves. His hands closed into fists. Again, it's his hands doing it. It's not his brain. He stiffened and went into a slight crouch. Everything about this description is making him sound quite animal, isn't it? Rather than human. His brain is not engaged. It is his body. It is his instincts doing the actions. His crouched body sounds like a cat or a feline, a big cat about to pounce, doesn't it? And these closed fists are incredibly aggressive. So this tension goes hand in hand, as it did in chapter 1, with the idea that it's really a Darwinian world where the fittest survive, where the strongest, most alpha male will be the dominant one. And it's got nothing to do with brain power. It's all about physical strength at this stage. So again, there's this sense that it's biology that dictates the tragic inevitability of the drama. As if that wasn't foreshadowing enough for the violence that's to come, George really explains in very clear detail to Lenny exactly what will happen later on in the novel. After Curly leaves, George says, "You're going to have trouble with that Curly guy. I've seen that kind before. He was kind of feeling you out. He figures he's got you scared. He's going to take a suck at you the first chance he gets." "I don't want no trouble." "I hate that kind of bastard. If he tangles with you, Lenny, we're going to get the can. Don't make a mistake about that. He's the boss's son." Just watch exactly what happens later on in the novel and see how close to the truth George was with his foreshadowing predictions right here. And brilliantly, and this is what I really love about Steinbeck, all these little details in the background, all these little descriptions. This conversation between George and Lenny, where George is talking about what's going to happen, takes place to the backdrop of sounds of threat and aggression, that violence just bubbling away in the background. So while they're talking, outside there's a sound of jingling harness. A clear call came. "Stableberg, oh Stableberg, Where the hell is that goddamn... Listen to the sound of chains, the aggression in the way the men are talking to each other there. And then another moment of sounds which build the tension even further. The sound of the approaching grain teams was louder. Thud of big hooves on hard ground, drag of brakes and the jingle of trace chains. Men were calling back and forth from the teams. These sounds really signify the sense of threat and the sense of impending catastrophe. And it's wonderful throughout this novel how Steinbeck is able to do that by providing these little details in small descriptive paragraphs. You could take a tip for your own creative writing from Steinbeck. It's one of the very best things about his writing. Even Lenny is able to understand, although in very simplistic and purely emotional terms, the threat of this place. When he has this outburst and says to George, "I don't like this place, George. This ain't no good place. I want to get out of here." A really strong sense from this instinctive, childlike character that this is not a very safe place, and again expressed in a child's way. Then we've got the triple appearance of Curly. You know, he appears for the first time, he crouches like somebody getting ready to pounce, like an animal getting ready to pounce. Later on in the chapter, he comes in again looking for his wife, and the chapter ends with him peering in again, jumping in again, looking for his wife. And this kind of triple appearance of him yo-yoing in and out of the bunkhouse suggests his aggressive movement and the fact that he really is a threat. Look at the verbs used to describe him, particularly in the last entrance. Curly popped into the doorway. Curly jerked out. Popped, jerked. We'd been told he's a fighter, he's a boxer by Candy, and he moves around in aggressive and jerky ways. He is a violent outburst waiting to happen. And apart from this kind of animalistic violent streak that these men, or some of these men in particular, are exhibiting in this Darwinian survival of the fittest world, there is also a high degree of animal sexual tension as well. I mean, this is a world where animals breed without any human control. Slim is asked what kind of puppies are going to come to his dog, and he says, "I don't know, some kind of shepherds, I guess. That's the most kind I've seen around here when she was in heat." So his dog has been in heat, so ready to procreate. There was sheepdog around when she was in heat. The humans have no control over this. The dogs are just out there going at it and reproducing, which is animalistic, isn't it? But the way this is really most clearly expressed in this chapter is with Lenny's behaviour towards Curly's wife, or really Lenny and Curly's wife's interaction put together. She walks in, she's incredibly flirtatious, but look at the animalistic descriptions of the way she moves her body and of the way that Lenny looks at her. She throws her body forward and Lenny's eyes move down over her body. Exactly like the way Curly behaves, isn't it, when he's getting ready to fight? Lenny's brain is not mentioned there. Lenny's eyes move down over her body. Again, this is instinctive behaviour. This is the body working by itself without a brain. It's animal-like behaviour. It is not thoughtful, rational human behaviour. She did not seem to be looking at Lenny. She bridled a little. Well, a bridle is an object that you put over a horse's head to control it. The use of that word has an echo or a connotation for the reader that automatically makes us think of horses. So we associate her with animal-like behaviour. And the way that she's not even looking at him makes it sound like her behaviour is also instinctive. Lenny watched her, fascinated. She smiled archly and twitched her body. He's fascinated. She twitches her body. It's all very animalistic, instinctive. There's not much rational behaviour going on. So yeah, apart from the threat coming through this sense of violence or the potential for violence through the men, there's also this other animalistic aspect going on at the same time, which is the sexual tension. We see that the dogs go at it, and we see that Lenny and Curly's wife display these animalistic, sexualised behaviours between each other. If you like this video, then please do give it a like, because that really helps my video to reach a wider audience. It's not just you saying a nice thing to me, it's you helping me to get my video out there so more people see it. So click on the like button, please, and do subscribe to the channel so that you can see when I put out my next video, which is going to be on the characters in chapter 2 of Of Mice and Men.